Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spare a Thought, the podcast that shines a light on the people, ideas, issues, and organisations that are often overlooked or misrepresented in the media. I'm your host, Tom Spare. Today, I'm joined by 5 members of the Friday Writers Club, run by Briony Goffin at the Cardiff Writers Studio. Together with the writers and Briony, we'll be talking about the radical act of writing. Writing as an act of defiance in dark times, in dark months, when motivation runs low. In a world where AI can generate text instantly, what does it mean to sit down and put your own thoughts on the page? What drives us to create? And how do we keep going when the voice in our heads tell us we're not good enough? This year, 2026, marks 10 years since I joined Briony's Sunday Writing Group. In that decade, I've evolved into a more confident writer. During some of the darkest times in my life, writing has been my outlet. It's been my comfort blanket, my salvation. When this episode was recorded, it was early January 2026, in deepest, darkest winter, a time when the pressure to be productive is high, but our energy levels don't always match. I've come to understand that winter is better suited to reflection, to inside work, to being creative in our own quiet ways. It's a time to start things gently, to nurture the work that will bloom when the sun returns. I see this episode as a companion piece to the episode that started the year with my friend and the director of Be the Change Media Network, Lily Mott, called Living a Creative Life, and an episode I released with Briony last year in January 2025, simply called Spare a Thought for Creativity. Now let's turn to my guests and the subject of today's episode, the radical act of writing. Enjoy. If we could go around the room, the virtual room, and introduce ourselves. So on my top left corner, we've got Tess. So Tess, if you want to unmute yourself and say who you are.
I'm part of the Friday Writers Group, which I love. I know we'll talk more about that. I'm also a very keen gardener when I can manage that. I'm a cyclist. I suppose I'm a searcher. Maybe that's an important thing to me. I'm currently working with refugees and asylum seekers in a volunteer capacity, which is extraordinary and very, very nourishing work and humbling. But apart from that, my background is first of all in teaching drama and then in working as a therapist, an expressive art therapist with art, movement, sound and lighting. So that used to be my passion and is still my passion, but I'm not drawing on that vein very much at the moment.
Briony Goffin, a creative writing teacher, mentor, founder of Cardiff Writers Studio, and of course facilitator and host of Friday Writers Club.
Hi Tom, I'm David O'Connor. I am a husband, a father, and I'm going to say it, a writer based in Cardiff. I've been part of the Cardiff Writers Group for 15 years.
Amazing. 15 years. Wow. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. Hi, Tom. And hi, everyone. Rachel Hartley. I've been part of Briony's studio, I suppose, it's for about 15 years. And I work for charities and I'm trustee for a charity. And then about 5 years ago, I decided I wanted to expand my creative life or re-find my creativity. So I got back into writing more and performing more. So I've done over the years, I've done everything from improvised comedy and performing at Edinburgh Fringe to walking the boards. And I'm also a supporting artist, so could be seen walking around the hospital of casualty now and again. But writing is something I really want to take forward, and that's why I've become part of Friday Writers Club.
My name's Caroline Martin, and I'm retired. I used to be, in my very former days, a probation officer, and then I changed direction and became a complementary therapist. I've retired from all that now, so I've got a lot of spaciousness around me to be able to write. That doesn't mean that I always do write, but it means the opportunity is there. And I think I've been coming to Briony's events for about 15 years, Briony, would you say?
I think so. I remember one of the first things that Caroline wrote about frogs. Does that ring a bell, Caroline? About being gifted frogs from all over the place.
Oh, so it's been a long time anyway, and I'm delighted to be part of what Briony puts on offer.
Hi, I'm Naomi Major. I work full time for a charity and have 3 kids. So I have kind of less spaciousness than some in the group, but I found it's kind of enabled me to make a bit of space for writing each week and to kind of build up a regular practice. I joined a little bit later than everybody else, but I've kind of forgotten that, I think, over the last year or so, and kind of, very much feel part of the group.
Thank you all for joining me today. And what I've already picked out here is the sort of range of backgrounds that we've got, and also a feeling of shifting gear or going in a particular direction and then changing and making a conscious decision to try an effort at sort of living a creative life, which is exactly the sort of thing that we want to be talking about today.
Give me, but only because I think it's so interesting that we've all learned something about each other today. It speaks of our work as being so specific about leading the writer's life, leading the creative practitioner's life, that is absolutely what we honour in each other, and that we don't know all these other facts and sort of background realities for each other. And so I've learned something today. I know that others have learned something as well. Forgive me for interrupting, but I just want to say it's fascinating.
Yeah, and that's really cool, isn't it? Because I suppose it's sort of like, maybe we'll get onto this. This was a question I'll ask for later, but it's something to ponder about. How do you explain your creative life to people that aren't necessarily sort of pursuing that as well? So that's something to perhaps ponder a bit later on. How does it feel to write something that, 5, 10, 30 minutes or an hour earlier didn't exist? Does anyone want to have a stab at that?
Yeah, I was thinking about it in terms of your term radical, Tom, and how radical I'm actually being by essentially cultivating an idea or an image, which, my process as a writer is perhaps to hold on to something and allow it to grow in my mind before I actually commit it to page. So I'm kind of, I might have something kind of in the back of my mind while I'm going through my working day and through my normal kind of practices, that I might suddenly then go, I have an interest in that, and I'll do a little bit sort of background research. The exhilaration, though, that I think that where we tap into is absolutely that. So that once, as I say, if I've been holding on to something which interests me, excites me, and then to put a word down, a sentence down, a paragraph, and allow that to kind of flow, absolutely. I'm then staring at that with a big smile on my face. 2 days later, I might relook at it and go, actually, that smile turns upside down, and I start to question and I start to think about the editing process. But that initial act of committing that idea to paper, I think, is really gratifying.
Yeah, and just following on from that, it's with Briony over the years, and particularly in her Sunday groups, we often write on the spot, and you'll know that we get given a prompt, whether it's in person or online, and there's a time, and 20 minutes later you have to produce a piece of you produce a piece of work, if you wish, which you then feed back, and that is exciting. It's one of the most exciting ways of writing, because I haven't thought about that. I haven't, sometimes the prompts I'm thinking, why Briony? But then something will come out of it, and that's very, very exciting, and particularly if it's well received by other members of those sort of Sunday sessions. And I think it's extraordinary sometimes that you can be sat there, as you say, January, or whenever it is, days when you're not feeling inspired, when you're not feeling motivated. I've always found when I attend Briony sessions that something will come out, and so that feeling is something you feel fulfilled, you feel satisfied. Actually, now and again feel quite proud, and it's not something I tend to feel or like to feel. You feel like you shouldn't, but to be able to produce something that makes people laugh or resonates and it was not there at all before, is really special.
Yeah, I'm also aware, like, the kind of experience of exhilaration that David described, and sometimes feeling quite transported, like you're thinking about one thing, you sit down to write, and it takes you somewhere entirely different. But I found myself thinking that there is also the opposite of that. There's the days where you sit down to write and like either nothing will come, or you write something and you're like, I'm boring myself. I'm not getting anywhere. And I think one of the things that shifted for me in my writing practice is to recognize those days are still really valuable. And often when I come back to the next day to sit down again, I feel like I've made progress, and I look back on the previous day, it's not as bad as I thought it was, or I'm just able to tap into something else. And so I think I kind of got a bit more sense of consistency. And I used to think that writing was like entirely inspired. And if I wasn't feeling inspired and writing amazing words, then I was doing something wrong. So I think there's something about also sometimes it is just hard work, and you don't feel like you're making progress, and it's just something about keeping going with that.
Amazing. Thank you, Naomi. And Caroline?
Yeah, I think having the writing project or trying to be a writer, live as a writer, there's like an additional dimension to your life. It's like you're relating to life in a slightly different way. You're documenting sometimes events that have happened and engaging with them in a slightly more creative way than you otherwise might do. So it means that life feels slightly richer. And even if the writing is not top class, and, there's a lot to be said for editing it strongly and even doing away with it completely, there's something about that relationship of in the back of your mind, in your spirit, that you're engaging with life in a more creative way, in a richer way.
For me, there's the excitement, and I say it's cultivated by the environment that I think we all respect and honour Briony as our kind of mentor in relation to giving us these platforms. But for me, it's the possibility of moving out of the ordinary. So just the idea of potentially seeing either yourself or someone else in that sort of group producing something off the cuff that didn't exist 5 minutes before, that maybe takes you out of the ordinary, that I think is something to relish when it is cold and maybe you're not as motivated as you might need to be in those kind of winter months.
Yeah, sorry, just to follow up on that. And it's interesting about podcasts. I can see everybody nodding at every point that everybody's making, and that maybe that won't come across. But yeah, absolutely. It's for us, whether it's the Friday Writers Club or the Sunday sessions, hearing other people, knowing that they just created that. And we're in a room full of people in the Sunday sessions that have created in that moment. Is something really special to see what our brains can do and what human brains can produce. And with the Friday Writers Club, obviously we have a bit more time, but often because we're working on projects, but often people are writing, that week it's still new, it's still fresh, and it's still raw, as Briony will always say, but it's special.
What immediately you posed the question a couple of times that I've written in Briony's chapter Sundays, I remember things just falling out of me. I thought a lot about birth. I'd never given birth, but certainly sometimes in your sessions, Briony, something just arrives. And like you, Tom, I tend to write quite at length, and then there is a kind of when I read, that is quite something. And, it's kind of like not something to admit, really, some like Quaker thing in my background, or I don't know, Pilgrim Fathers thing of, don't be proud. But that thing of, oh my gosh, I wrote something. And I think that's always been a different experience to kind of grinding away a little bit. Sometimes things do fall out of me and then I present them in the Friday Writers. But I think it's very, as I've said so often, the crucible that you create, Briony, is so special. That sense of safety. And I feel you have transferred that very much to the Friday Writers. But because we're not actually writing there and then, it has a different flavour, And I know on your list, Tom, the inner battle was one of the things we might talk more about. And I feel like all of us, perhaps me especially, all of us have talked quite a bit about that. And I think I've experienced that much more with the Friday Writers. Like, it isn't just falling out of me. I've got to do this bloody thing. And try and produce something for my turn. So it's a real acknowledgement of what Briony provides in those sessions, and how that's been my main motivation, really, for even joining the Friday Writers, which felt a huge, a writer. Well, I'm not really a writer. I can write letters, but I'm not really a writer. And I remember telling friends I was going to do this, and that did feel very radical. Who on earth do I think I am? So I know it's been an enormous privilege to be part of the group, and it's just in flavour different to going to a writing session with Briony where you write immediately.
That's a very interesting point, Tess, about I was in the group who mentioned this too, about inspiration when that just falls onto the page or when it doesn't arrive, but then also writing as a practice too. And as a discipline, discipline is probably the wrong word, but doing it regularly and in a timeline for a time frame or to be delivered at some point. And that's something I find quite difficult. The environment needs to be right. And it's almost like, to find that. And I've quoted this before, but Leonard Cohen said, if I knew where the good ideas came from, I'd go there more often. So it's like that search for a good idea. Briony, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I have it's such a discipline for me to sort of sit on all my comments because I have so much to say, but I will just keep it brief, actually. Firstly, I just want to identify as somebody who was emphatically nodding their head through that discussion, because obviously it won't show up on audio. And it's so lovely for me to hear my students talk in this way about what that exhilaration feels like, what that graft feels like. Briefly, I just want to refer to the fact that when we are doing sessions where we write on the spot, I do always dedicate time to reflect how the writing experience felt, as much to show that is why we are here. It's not all outcome. It's as much about that process of creating and how that kind of tastes for each writer, and so that they then develop insight, so that they get to learn about themselves as writers and what conditions they need in order to feel productive, and that they don't place any value judgment on that. It's all kind of just useful information about how that writing experience felt. And then, I just wanted to follow up on Tess's point, because what distinguishes, we've referred to the Sunday sessions a few times, what distinguishes the Sunday sessions and other forms of my teaching and the Friday Writers Club is that the Friday Writers Club is an invitation for writers who have ongoing projects or works in progress that they seek to nurture into maturity with the feedback and support of the group. So there is something very radical taking place, because in order to enroll, let's say, you have to declare to yourself and the world, I am a writer who is wanting to grow, who maybe would like to share my work with a wider audience. And that, is radical. So I just wanted to place the distinction between the Friday writers, because you are beginning to lead the writer's life in declaring that I am part of this group. And that is fascinating, because you are taking responsibility for your work in a very different way than producing work on the spot, which obviously is incredibly exciting and valuable in its own right, but it's a different relationship to the written word. And you have to stay with the imposter syndrome and the doubts and all of that between seeing one another, and to hold that for yourself. And then obviously part of what we do as a group is then help kind of untangle all of those feelings around, why is this piece of work making me feel ... And that's what we can offer each other. But just to declare to the world, I am a writer and I have an ongoing project, and I wish to press send on an email and for this work to land in everybody's inboxes to read in their own time without me there. That in itself is radical, I think.
Because declaring you are something is setting yourself apart from others, and we live in a time where it's actually quite rare for people to position themselves and to take a stand, and I think that's really important act. And I guess following from that about how the sensation of writing or the achievement of writing something, I wonder if anyone has any thoughts about why they write. This might get a bit meta, I suppose. But Orwell wrote a piece called Why I Write, and he talks about that sort of 4 elements, which is like ego, which is a part in all of us, I suppose. The aesthetic of it, of writing something that's pleasing, that's something that's beautiful, it's something that observes something magical in the world. There's the sort of history-based ones, which are there to write something for prosperity, to preserve a moment in time, to record something. And then the political, to change someone's mind, to shift someone's opinion. Do any of those sort of things resonate with you as to why you would write? I know that's a big question. Caroline?
I think the ego one I can identify with. The others not so much, but I've got something that I don't know might be interesting. So I've written 86,000 words, which are in a drawer, they're a metaphorical drawer. And but that's what I came to the Friday Writers Group with, was this piece that was supposed to be turning into a book. And I've now got to edit it. But where I'm going with this is that I think there were very psychological reasons for wanting to do that piece of writing. So the characters are kind of parts of myself. It's kind of fairy tale myth, but the characters are representing dimensions of myself. And I think I'm trying to work through something from way back through the story that I'm telling. So I know that doesn't fit very nicely with the 4 points that you spoke to, but that is definitely something that I'm very conscious of, that it's an age-old tussle in myself that I'm trying to work out through the writing. I don't know whether that's kind of, something that's recognised or not.
Yeah, and I wonder, Caroline, if Orwell was, coming through today, he would add probably that aspect of searching for something. I can imagine that it's like seeking something in your past, or an expression of oneself. And I suppose there's an element of ego in the sense of expressing that, but what you're saying is a lot more subtler than that. It's sort of like exploring different parts of who you are and expressing that in a particular way. David?
Yeah, just to kind of lean into the sort of historical aspect, Tom, and only a sort of tiny bit, and I think maybe there probably is something kind of ego driven around this, because it's me kind of putting up a bit of a mirror to my DNA and my family's DNA, but I have very clear memories of my grandfathers and my uncles and my aunties and my mum and dad telling stories to not just me and not just my brother and sister, but to gathered children at various kind of points in my childhood. The more I kind of write, the more I kind of start to think about some of those stories. And very, very rarely do those stories kind of seem to chime with something that feels kind of universal. They all seem quite idiosyncratic. And so there's an aspect of me where I'm kind of trying to, capture that idiosyncrasy in a weird way, and kind of say, well, that's the oddness of my understanding of what it is to be kind of human. And so whether that sort of chimes with anyone else, I don't know. But as I say, many kind of train journeys and bus journeys or late night over, gathered around the fire, those kind of things. I just remember those times, and that's maybe what I'm trying to recreate.
Yeah, Rachel?
Yeah, I think some of those chime with me, and I often wonder, why do I write? Because it's a big statement. It's a big statement saying I'm a writer, and putting up a lot of effort, not just for Friday Writers Club, but these projects can be huge, and I seem to have several on the go, and I'm trying to think what's different about them. And I guess, one of them is political. It talks about free speech and the internet being controlled. It's not one I've shared with the group yet, because I think it's slipping out of time, possibly. I think maybe I missed a moment, but then I still want to finish it. So that one I say would be political. Another very much talks about my experiences of mental health, but in a fictionalized way, and for some reason is set around a thriller. But that's because I felt that, I think because I read and I watch film and I watch TV, and I didn't see it anywhere else. I didn't see that kind of story being told. So it's about giving a voice to that, and whether it's any good, you know, who knows? Whether anybody will ever read it other than Friday Writers, who knows? But I felt it felt like it had to come out, that it was a unique experience, because it always will be. Even if someone went through a similar experience, it's always unique to you, that I would like to get out and for others to see, because I think it's ignored. And then, you know, the one I'm sort of working with the group at the moment is set in sort of nighttime economy, and it's just because of, you know, previous life. I just didn't see those people represented anywhere else, and I really wanted to write about this mix of people who are all sort of composites of people I've met over the years and their stories. So it's something about shining a light. Whether I'm the right person to do or not, who knows? But that's what I wanted to do, was to explore those lives.
Tess?
Yeah. Why do I write? When I began, I mean, I don't have a big project. My project is somebody, I think maybe it was you, Briony, or Sarah, or both of you. Sarah, someone who wasn't here. So I'm writing at the moment a book of fragments. So they are all just micro glimpses of Tess, I suppose, in different ways. But I got kind of a bit fed up with that in this last term, and I started writing about my parents and my grandparents. And I realized that I'm kind of, it is a little bit. So that's sort of memoir, and there's a history thing in it. I want to leave something. There is a sense of I want to leave something, I think. And if anyone will read them. But I'm kind of curious also that none of them, the one I wrote about my mother is the one I'm most satisfied with, I think. But they're all a bit like lifted pebbles from a brook, you know, a glimpse, this dappling water, and it all looks wonderful. And then because I'm writing, it gets lifted out, and then, so there's this kind of aspiration, and it falls short a little bit, I think. And then I was sitting thinking about that as David and Rachel were talking, thinking, well, it's something, you know, it's more than nothing. And I think that's where I am with my writing. It's more than nothing. It's having a go. And I'm blessed with the two people closest to my life, my partner and my niece are, you know, I just have to give up sharing stuff with them, which is another whole thing. Who do I share with? Because my darling partner is kind of his response. Don't share it with me, because, you know, I don't know what to say, would be his response. And my niece slightly similar. So that's been a real surprise, because look, I'm sharing this extraordinary part of me. And although I know I'm loved by them, they just don't meet that bit. So that's, and we have talked quite a bit about that in our group, who to share with.
You're there really for the work of sharing stories, for getting feedback. And I think that's really important, that often when we share our work with the people that we love and we respect and that sort of thing, we might get a cold shoulder, or we might not get the response that we want. Briony?
Just listening to the multiple reasons why people write, I think also is what we honour in the group itself, that there isn't one reason, and for some we're still discovering why we write, and those compulsions or those curiosities are many, and they evolve and they change, which is why when we respond to one another's work, the really important part of our work together is the writer guides the kind of feedback they are looking for. So when they send their work, they also very clearly communicate what it is that they want from us as feedbackers. And that is crucial to our relationship, to the trust amongst us, so that we are supporting that writer to help that piece of work become what they really want it to be, not what we necessarily want it to be. It's very important that that writer is aware of their own kind of intentions, their own hopes for that writing, and then with the questions that they give us as writers, we support that process. So we don't have a kind of a blanket sort of feedback and a process. We respond in a much more nuanced way to what the writers need. And I think that's takes into account the multiplicity of reasons behind why different people write.
Just to sort of add, I think Briony's making an excellent point about how we operate as a group. So And that aspect around how you orient the words and yourself and your development path with the people that we're sort of working with. So because of the eclectic nature of the people in the group, because of the diversity of projects, because of there will always be kind of different reasons for us approaching particular work in a particular way, that guiding step is absolutely crucial. And I think in terms of my own sort of development, the ability to, I don't always sort of get it right, but to go, this is what I want from this particular 1,000 words. That's absolutely sort of key. And it then feeds into the writing itself. I feel like as a writer, this orientation is part of my bag of tricks. It's part of the tool set, but that can't be the only thing. There needs to be enough for a reader in a closed circle of 6-7 people as to thousands of millions. You need to have that orientation for a reader to stay with you. And that's something that I'm learning through this process.
Yes, I'm so glad you said about that for me, that's the most radical thing about all. I mean, I guess we are radical if we're going to make this stand, and we are going to write. But the fact of how, with coming back to the crucible that you begin, you have begun, Briony, but that we all take up, that we are really honouring each other, and what does each person want in terms of feedback. And that is, a lot of education, or what's been called education. I never, ever have had that in my education. I've never had just someone, well, I, of course, being a therapist, I might call that person centered. What does that person need? And just, being empathic and unconditional. Being unconditional is really, really unusual. It's getting more unusual, I think, with the political flavor we have. So that is radical with the biggest R, I think, and it's extraordinarily fruitful. I mean, I cry most times I write because I get feedback. Not that they don't bring like, oh, you could change this, or how about that? But, just that sense of warmth and acceptance is extraordinary.
And also the fact that I always see, I used to see writing as a solo sport, but actually it's, it is a practice. It's something that you can do in community, and it's far more richer and rewarding. That, when I go to Sunday Writers, it's exhausting for a number of reasons, in the fact that I've given something over in a short space of time, thrown all my energy in, have a little break, have a bit of chat, and then it's the listening part, and absorbing that and being enriched by that. Because, one of the things, the advice that's always generic advice that's put out there is read widely, and that's something I'm not very good at. So the fact that I can hear stories and hear people's perspectives and approaches, I quite like to think, oh, I like how they've technically done that. I appreciate the imagery, or how that made me feel. The next sort of question is really about your toolbox, about your approach, about how do you create the environment to write. Now that could be, obviously you go to your Friday Writers, but I'm also thinking of people that are want to create a bit of a rhythm of writing. Do you have any tips and tricks? Do you listen to music? Do you have a particular pen that you like to write with? The kit behind it all. So David, do you want to go?
The key thing for me is having a Naomi in your group. So someone else who'll pick up and create those spaces for us, actually. And that leans into how we kind of operate as a group. I mean, I talked about, I sort of ruminate around particular ideas, and it might take a couple of days, or it might take a couple of months before that to sort of hit the page. But actually, rhythm is a key thing. You commit to the act. By writing, you are a writer. I think that's the sort of key thing. And as I say, I honor kind of Naomi's role as part of this, because Naomi's been the one kind of going, right, guys, I'm going to be here, and here. That's what my week looks like. Join me, come join me. And that's great. That's really great.
Naomi, because you work full time, could you tell us a little bit, give us a bit of an insight into how you've got your family, full time work, and your writing as well.
Yeah, when I first joined the group, I wasn't sure if it was going to be doable to write 1,000 words and submit it 3 times the term. And I found sometimes I was like really last minute and apologizing profusely and by email for how late things were in. And I was staying up and sort of into the night or waking up early, which as you get older is definitely harder than it used to be. But I found that actually by starting to meet on Zoom with people and set aside some time, usually in the morning, just for a daily writing session, and just invite anyone who's free to join, has really allowed me to then reschedule my work that I could be doing, later in the day, so that I actually make writing priority. And because I'm quite a morning person, I find kind of first thing actually works quite well for doing something creative. And so I think that it hasn't been straightforward to kind of carve out that time, but it's been about 6 months or so. And I guess it's long enough to feel like David mentioned about a rhythm, and it just feels a lot more normal that a part of my day is writing, even if I only get a very few words done. And I also realized in doing it that we have just a very brief conversation about what we're intending to try and achieve, or we might say how we're doing. But often I've kind of ended up realizing how much it's not just about the words on the page, it's also about planning, or it's about looking back at what you've done, or the feedback that you had from the group. And there's kind of all these different stages to the writing process that are more than just that sit down, pen to paper kind of bit. And by having a daily practice and the kind of solidarity of other people who are also trying to do it, I think for me it's kind of broken through some of the resistance to, when you just want to do anything but write, or anything but focus on it. And so just having other people's company and hearing about other people's struggles, that we don't all find it easy all the time. But as you said, Tom, I really don't think of it as like a solitary act anymore. I think that writing with other people has really transformed my practice, and the fact that they're people who I know and I get to share my work with as well is also kind of an amazing thing.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it speaks to, don't want to get too political here, but the last 50 years we've seen very much the rise of the individual, the drive towards what can you do, bit like big polluting like oil companies and everything creating the idea of a carbon footprint, and that was their marketing tool to push the responsibility to an individual rather than these companies taking responsibility. And that idea of coming together in creative practice is a very radical act, because it's bringing stories together. And I think I've said this before in various Sunday sessions, that humans are born storytellers. That's what we are. From the very early stages of human existence, we're born to tell stories, whether that's on cave walls or fairy tales, or stories you tell your kids before they go to sleep at night, or the stories you share around the dinner table. Briony?
Briefly, when David was referring to his multi-generational joining around the fireside and stories being shared there, and I think so much of what I try to create is like a sort of a writing round a fire, sitting round the hearth atmosphere. I don't declare that very often, but that's how I kind of see it, that we are that workshop table, or this kind of virtual space that we occupy on a screen does have something of the sitting around the hearth feel of it, and drawing on something that is so innate and primal to sharing stories. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Would it be possible just to each of the writers to go around and talk a little bit about their projects or things they're working on? You can share as much or as little as you like. Rachel, do you want to kick things off?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I sort of slightly mentioned them earlier when I was talking about why I write. So I'm currently the one I'm working with Cardiff Writers Club is a project called the 3am Club, which is looking at and it's just I think this sometimes it's just a silly sort of closed room whodunit really when it comes down to it, but it's set in a world that I find fascinating, with characters that I think are interesting. And part of the joy of the Friday Writers Club is that for a long time I thought, well, how do I know this is any good? It comes back to your sort of the imposter syndrome, but I don't know if it's any good. I just know I enjoy writing it, and being able to submit it. I mean, part of that is that you're disciplined. You have to submit, and we all trust each other to submit work. So sometimes I'll submit things that I'm not particularly sure work at all, just to see what happens really, and see what the feedback is. And Briony's created a space that we've all then come behind, which is somewhere where you can be vulnerable and you can put forward writing that that maybe is so personal that you wouldn't share it anywhere else. And that's made me far more confident. And I just wanted to say that, acknowledge that, because this group is really, I think for years I thought, well, how do you share your writing? And maybe I'll go to one of those writers' circles, and I've never heard good things about them, and I felt too afraid to put out my writing. Whereas here I can share anything. I can share things that I think work and hear if they do, and I can hear that they don't. And one of my projects is, which I've stopped, which is why I'm no longer working on it for now. We've parked it a bit. It's because the group said, well, we love this character and we'd love to hear more about this character. And so it's supposed to be a tiny character. And now I've got, oh, well, actually, that's really interesting. So it's made me sort of pivot. So I've got to do a lot more work on that. But how interesting that was. And I didn't know a character I was fond of could have been bigger. So I was sort of underselling him. But it's by putting that out and the group giving me feedback that's allowed me to take another look at what I've produced. So the one that I'm working on, 3 AM Club, is nearly finished. I'm about 85,000 words, but I'm bringing a few more to the next term, as it were. And then we'll see. And then maybe it'll just be a wonderful challenge that I've achieved, and it will sit in the metaphorical drawer next to Caroline's, and or maybe it won't, and who knows. But I think that's what I'm looking forward to, is getting it finished. I think it's a story that I haven't read before, although I've been inspired by the things. And the groups really helped me to find that vulnerability. It's a safe space to share that work. And I wouldn't have got this far without it.
Can I briefly say what we can offer one another, as well as the readership of this work, is simply believing that these characters are real, they exist. As Rachel illustrated, we have a relationship with the characters in one another's stories, and we are invested, and we take them seriously. And I hope that is received as a real gift from the writer, because as Rachel referred to imposter syndrome, I mean, imposter syndrome comes from all kinds of places, and it's different for everybody, and that's sort of a little bit of personal work behind that. But what we can offer one another is to take their work seriously and to believe in their characters, to talk about their characters as if they're real, develop relationships and invest in their journey, their story. And that itself, I think, is really precious.
The group, as Briony said, kind of believing in and investing in the characters, because when I first shared this idea with the group, I felt really, really reluctant to sort of say it out loud and be like, I know this might sound really weird, but this is what happens in my story. And so, yeah, I'm kind of grateful to everybody for getting to the point of being able to share it more widely. And when I've gone to Sunday Writers, occasionally I've been able to say, working on this thing, this is what it is, without feeling too embarrassed.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And do you want to speak to, because obviously you talked about that reluctance to even talk about your work and the idea. Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about that inner battle, perhaps firstly about your reluctance to talk about your work, but then also how do you sort of keep motivated to keep doing it?
Yeah, I think probably in my work it's a mix of, to some extent we're all writing things that are drawing on our own lives, I think. And so I think for me it's been trying to find that mix of just what feels comfortable to share. We were talking about that recently, actually, kind of when you're actually about to press send and share it with the group. I think the trust that we've built up in the group has really helped to overcome that resistance to maybe sharing things that feel quite raw and perhaps closely based on personal experience. But also I think there's something in that when we are experimenting with something different in a device or the way that we're writing something, I think then knowing that other people are also trying to push those boundaries, and I think we're all quite brave in our writing in this group. Like, people are willing to share things that they may be, as Rachel said, I think we don't always feel sure about what we're sending. We don't have to feel like it's perfect or that we're totally sure of it. And I think that knowing that other people do that, I think allows us to be braver and more experimental and kind of build that confidence in saying, yeah, I can share this and maybe it does work, maybe it doesn't. And you guys tell me how you think, how does this land with you? and getting those varied responses from different people is really helpful in working out how to shape the next bit. And having people who are kind of following the story through different months of submissions also helps to kind of have other people are helping to hold it together somehow, because they've heard different pieces of it, and help to maybe make it feel like it's something that you can also hold, if that makes sense. Just think about how it's structured. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Tess, do you want to come in and talk about the inner battle and doubt and overcoming all of that?
I could just do 3 hours on this, Tom, if you got that long. The last piece, I'm just so timely this, because, we're beginning this next Friday and I'm thinking, what am I going to be doing? What's my project? The last piece I wrote was about the inner battle, and I got my partner in my ear. He said, so I've done 2 years now with this amazing group. Can I just say for the tape, and this may not even go out, how in love with everybody I feel as we talk. Oh my God. What a group. I mean, extraordinary. And I know we're just human beings, so this potential is everywhere, actually. But, it's amazing what is evolved. The inner battle. I think I've pretty much said about my project or my writing so far that it's been bringing pieces from the past that I liked or that had something, and I brought those together. And then I began to write what were meant to be letters, but kind of turned into just my memoir in a way about my parents and my grandparents. And I was thinking, I've just been given a book, in being a keen gardener, I've been given a book about two amazing gardeners, Christopher Lloyd at Great Dixter and Beth Chatto. If you're into gardening at all, you probably know them. And they wrote to each other for a long time. And I'm thinking, yeah, something about letters. And I'm sort of famous in my family at always never pruning down. Tess, it's going to be like 3 sides for an email, if there's such a thing as a side. But I think to be able to expansively have letters, one to another. And so these would be fictional characters, I think. So I'm just thinking about that. But the inner battle, it comes to mind going into the second year. And I remember my partner Geraint saying, what? You get to do another year or even another term. Why would you put yourself through that? So I feel like I have come to terms a little bit with the inner battle. It's so much to do with feeling like what I put down is of no substance. And so it's to do with self-worth. And I feel, and I have had, as I'm sure others had, tons of training on that, through teaching and, of course, therapy training. But it's still there, the imposter thing. So it's just, I don't know, I don't feel, obviously, that I'm at an end with that particular battle. It is a big ingredient, I think. And sometimes I just think, oh, gosh, I'll just bung this to them, but then I can never quite do that. And towards the end, there's always the needle that comes in and something comes up that I feel has grains of worthwhileness in it. I don't know if we had better education, the drumbeat, from the start, would we all have better self-worth? I mean, there's more of a chance of it, I think.
Thank you, Tess. Before I come to you, David, Caroline, I just wanted to bring you in. And if you could talk a little briefly about your project. I know you've mentioned it already, but also anything that you feel comes up when you're trying to sort of that inner battle of writing and putting sort of pen to paper or typing.
Yeah, so I arrived in the Friday Writers Group with this long project, and I sent people big sections, and then I sent it to an editor, and I got some really clear feedback from there as well. And then I just stuck it in a drawer. And what I've been doing ever since is sending standalone 1,000-word contributions. And but I have started thinking I'm going to get that project out and do the necessary editing. So it is beginning to sort of ripen. But, every time I write anything, I think, is this too personal? Is it accurate? Is it interesting? And I always have those conversations with myself that, I'm going to send it despite the way I feel. And usually I feel this isn't good enough, and then I get this wonderful feedback, but it's not all mushy sort of, oh, isn't it lovely feedback? It's really precise, well-crafted feedback. I'm always in awe of the way that people give feedback, because I find it the most difficult part of the process, giving useful feedback. And yet all these people give this very useful feedback, and I take it away and I edit the work in the face of the feedback, and I always end up with a much better honed, brighter, sharper version of the first draft, so it's always worth it. I have all those misgivings, but I've learned that, well, that's kind of the way I am. I'm just going to do that, and I have to just let that be and submit the work anyway, and then I get all this wonderful feedback, so it's worth it.
David, and I'll come to you afterwards, Naomi. Thank you.
All I was going to say, Tom, we talk, any kind of modern workplace talks a lot, and particularly in the last 12, 18 months, about psychological safety. For 15 years, I've been in a psychological safe environment, which for me means that I'm in a space where I feel like I can make mistakes and I can take risks with my writing. So that doesn't mean that on a single day I might be my worst self-critic or be kind of doubting what's on the page. But because I'm in this, there's this collective willingness to succeed, willingness to kind of champion. I feel like it doesn't really sort of matter. What's the worst that can happen if I make a mistake in writing a sentence? I'm not going to break a leg. The worst that can happen is someone goes, you might want to think about this. That might be a better way. That might really give emphasis to that particular sentence. And that's what I sort of do. So I get confidence from the fact that for the period that I've aspired to be a writer, this environment gives me the sort of platform to hopefully shoot for the stars.
Yeah, I was just really struck by when Caroline said about the feedback not being mushy, like the fact that we don't just sit around saying how great each other's work is, but there's real detailed, like, I'm not sure about that paragraph, like really picking up on the details and be knowing, I think, that other people are willing to do that makes the positive criticism easier to believe in, because it's balanced in that way. It's not all just affirming. And also, I think that having such a group of diverse writers giving feedback on something that you've worked on quite intensely, really, like there's something very refined about it, like there's lots of different perspectives, and it's something that you've already given quite a lot of thought to, but you still get lots of stuff that you hadn't even thought of. So I think, as well as the kind of collective encouragement, which I absolutely agree with David, definitely feels like a bit of a group pulling us all forward sometimes, to keep going. But also I think there's just that valuing the kind of, it's very much, I think, about trust and being able to believe in each other and to kind of very much value what other writers whose work you admire feel about your own. It's just an absolute gift. Yeah.
Thank you. And Briony?
Just to follow on from that, I mean, it's so humbling to sit here and find out how the atmosphere of the group does support these wonderful writers. But yeah, just to echo again from Caroline and Naomi, the praise is not arbitrary. It's not indulgent. It is precise, and it is the feedback is precise, and it is about helping the writing be the best that it can, but using the vision of what best means to the writer themselves. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of follow on with that notion that it's not arbitrary, our praise. It's very much bringing very, very careful attention to the text and backing up all our comments with evidence and reference to the text. And so I just wanted to just take that further. And as Naomi said, I think that is what allows for the trust to take place, because we know it's not arbitrary.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you all for joining today. It's been a really lovely discussion, and I've learned a lot more about you, and it's great to hear about the practice. And I think it'll be reassuring to people that perhaps are not as far ahead as you, as in you've got an ongoing project and something you're structuring and you found community, that you still have your doubts, that you still find it difficult to write, that you still, have to get that motivation as well. And that might be a bit of a daunting thing, that it never stops, that the doubt probably doesn't stop. And it's a good thing that you have to think through, but it's great to have a space where you can share your ideas and have that safety, because I think a lot of people see the world in either, there's two sort of versions, that you're either praised for something that you are not, or you are heavily criticized, and you're debilitated by that. So that there is something that's in the middle, which is safe to say, you're great, and here's some really constructive thing to make that even better and what you're putting out into the world. The final question is really about the sort of the wider world, and in an age of AI where text can be generated instantly, what does it mean to sit down and write in your own words?
Can I jump in as the person who's not sitting down and writing in their own words in the group? We were talking about exhilaration at the beginning of the session. So just to kind of loop back to that, I think there is something glorious about when you find something you've been looking for a long time. So whatever it is that you've lost, an actual thing. So the other day, my husband lost his gloves, and when he found them, I was saying, how does it feel? How does it feel? Savor this moment. And for me, it's exactly the same thing as when you find the right word you were looking for, or the right phrase or analogy or comparison, and that sometimes it has to kind of be a process that is taking place behind the scenes at some other kind of layers of consciousness. But that thrill of finding the right word, the problem solving, and that's something that is automated would never allow for that absolute joy of the brain bringing together different images in a kind of collision that makes you go, yes, that says something new or fresh. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that for me, it's really exhilarating, that moment of suddenly finding the right word or placing two images next to each other and something new happens.
Caroline?
Yeah, I think there's something really life-affirming in that. There's something, you look at maybe a sentence that you've constructed and it works, and there's something that really moves the heart. It's an emotional connection. It's not just cerebral, and it's life-affirming. It just makes you feel more alive.
Makes you feel more alive. That should be on a bumper sticker, Caroline, for one of the sessions. Rachel?
Yeah, I suppose two aspects of it. With regards to AI, I was thinking about that for one of my projects. I was lucky enough to spend time in New York, so I was setting the project in New York, and there was an escape scene down one of those the fire escapes down the side of the building, which is so iconic. And I could have looked all that up, and I'm sure if I used AI, I could have found lots of interesting information about that. But for me, what was important was to stand under one and go, right, could they actually reach? Because I know what height could they reach? And where would they go? Because it's in this neighborhood. Where would they go next to escape? Is that possible? And be able to look at it, and also to feel the pavement underneath your feet, and to smell. The smell is not what you think, and the sounds. And I don't think it's about that using your human senses, all of them, to then create authenticity. And I think that's what's exciting about writing. And then just on another example is one of my pieces that isn't a novel, is a small piece that I came to when I got a bit stuck, has comedy in it. And there's nothing more sort of affirming when I hear that something made someone laugh, or I see that it made someone laugh if you're reading it live. And I think knowing that you put an image and the right word, because it's so precise comedy, I feel, to make that sort of chain reaction to produce a laugh is one of the things I enjoy the most about writing. And I think, as Briony was saying, that feels so life affirming to produce that kind of feeling in someone. It's not just here's an experience that we know could be quite sad. This is actually something that's going to make you really emote in that motion by laughter, and that's really special.
Tess?
What you said, Briony and Caroline, that coming alive thing, and I'm going back to when I was sitting in a cafe in Barry telling two of my trusted friends I was going to do this extraordinary thing. I was going to join this group 2 years ago. And it was a kind of choice's choice. I thought, this is a very special thing, and I cannot let it not. I have to be part of it. And so I suppose there's some inner quest. It's like growth, I suppose. Why do snowdrops grow? Hopefully they're coming up now. Because they just do. And that thing of finding So thinking of your story with the particular ring, Briony, but that thing of it comes forth, and that Rachel, I so often quote your help with a particular piece where Rachel at the end of it said, that word is whatever it was. Wow. So that it's multifaceted. Partly it's me finding the words, but then it's the group going, how about that? And then plung. Something that was clunky, it suddenly is like a smoothly opening gate. So the whole thing of being part of the group, aiding each other's writing, but also just one's own self-discovery. Because it's a torture as well. There is so much. For me, there's so much self-doubt and stuff in it. And as my partner, wrings his hands thinking he's going to be hearing about this. But I suppose a plant pushing through the ground is not always easy. And that's how it is. It just has to grow.
Can we go David and then Rachel?
Perhaps use the word discovering. I think Rachel talked about, how she discovered perhaps and really kind of tuned into one of her particular projects. I think for me, my second project started from an image in a cable full of photographs that Briony diligently cut out and asked a series of writers in a particular workshop to kind of go, which one of those kind of, is singing out to you? And I picked a particular sort of black and white photograph of a Japanese, in my eyes, maths professor sitting behind a desk with a wrapped present there. And I never really knew how to take that forward. And I kind of jumped into a few kind of aspects of, but it always felt like I was creating a world for him that didn't necessarily exist and didn't quite fit. And then I happened to be lucky enough to be in Tokyo on my wedding anniversary last year, and I persuaded my wife that it would be a great thing to go and see this wooden tuna fishing boat that has been meticulously restored after being damaged in the 1950s from the atomic bomb testing regime of the US. But to be really close to that and touching that boat and talking to the curator, suddenly I was like, I know who this person is, and I know what their family are, and all of them. And suddenly I had a pathway. And that was just because I was, as I say, it was that tactile discovery. So there are stories for us everywhere, I suppose, is the kind of end of that piece. So
I just think about finding that unique voice. Some of that comes from this group. I feel like we really are a collective. It's not just individuals who come together at the same time. It really feels like a group that almost feels like we should never break that, and we should always be in each other's lives forever and ever. And we sort of joke that if one of us moves away, it doesn't matter because we'll get up at 5 a.m. and join online anyway. But what that does, because it creates that space, and Dave was absolutely right in that sort of modern term of psychological safety. It's exactly what that is. This is such a safe space that we can find what resonates, and what resonates is that human connection. It's what we feel, what makes us laugh, what makes us cry. And I think because we can be vulnerable in this group, and because we trust each other to share that vulnerability, that's why it's making us better writers as individuals, and that I can see our confidence growing as a collective, and even if we still have that imposter syndrome, we still are confident in each other to share, and that's what's useful about it.
Amazing, thank you, Rachel. And finally, Briony.
Briefly, I just want to refer, it's very hard for me to sit back and not play a facilitator role, and I keep wanting to sort of consolidate and summarize what's being said, but just to kind of bring together some of the words that have been used in that last round of discussion. So Rachel was sort of talking about how it feels to be somewhere, and David was also referring to what it means to kind of be within touching distance of his subject. And it's one of those old things that creative writing teachers kind of band around, but it's that idea of writing what you know, whether you're writing fiction, autobiography, those things that you have felt on the inside. And I guess just looping back to AI doesn't know, it hasn't felt. And if we are seeking that kind of connection, that sort of purity of our intention being received and met, from a very lived experience. That's what AI can't give us. And just listening to those anecdotes about knowing how something feels to be there. And as a consequence, the writing is all the more relatable and familiar, even if the reader has never been there. They recognize it as something that is credible and true. And that is what AI can't do.
Thank you all. I really appreciate it. It's been a really nourishing conversation. It's I've learned a lot about you, which I really appreciate. And thank you for sharing your ideas and your stories and your perspectives. I know it will be a big help for anyone listening that's sort of doubting about their writing ability, that the most important thing you to do is, as Briony would say, is get pen to paper or to type to start, and then to go from there, because you have permission from all of us to call yourselves a writer and to do that act. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. It's been great.
Great. And Tom, you can
Tom.
take it through into tomorrow's workshop.
Yeah, the work continues.
Never
back to the coal face.
Can I just say, I'm so humbled by everything you've said about the group folks. I just want to acknowledge that. And who knew Caroline used to be a probation officer? I'd just like to add that to the picture as well. I know Rachel used to be.
Yes.
Oh wow! Okay,
Caroline was.
There we are.
Therapists, probation officers. We've got a good mix. So there we have it, Briony and the Friday Writers Club. My thanks to all my guests today, to Briony, to David, to Tess, to Naomi, Rachel, and to Caroline. You've all been wonderful, and it was really great to speak to you. Today's episode is the last before an extended break for the show. I'll be back with episode 50 in the spring. The rhythm, format and regularity of future episodes will likely change as I try to get that sweet spot of a balance between podcasting, my full-time job, and embracing the changes of the seasons, catching up with friends, and hopefully doing more creative work as well. If you enjoyed today's episode, as I said at the top, in the show notes you'll find links to previous episodes, linked to the topic of creativity and writing. The back catalogue of Spare a Thought is available wherever you found this episode. So please rate, like, subscribe, and share the show. It really helps amplify the podcast to new audiences. You can also follow Spare a Thought on Instagram, search Spare a Thought Media, and you can subscribe to my newsletter on Substack at tomspare.substack.com. In the weeks ahead, I'll be re-releasing past episodes as part of a series I'm calling The Rewind. These are a mix of my favourite episodes and the most listened to as well. This year, 2026, marks 10 years since I joined Briony Sunday Writing Group. In that decade, I've evolved into a more confident writer. During some of the darkest times in my life, writing has been my outlet. It's been my comfort blanket, my salvation. It was a privilege to speak to the Friday Writers Club and to Briony. In honour of them, I wanted to share a short piece to close out today. Something I wrote back in October 2025 under the theme of Out of Sight. We concealed the truth in our secret club, honouring every second Sunday with the truth that writing was a radical act. As the world continued to spin, we spun the wheels and made our golden threads that weaved a tapestry few else would ever read or hear. As long as there are writers, I thought, the resistance continued. Keep writing, I say, until the very end, whenever that might be. Thanks for listening to Spare a Thought. This has been the radical act of writing with the Friday Writers Club and Briony Goffin. The title track for this show is Young Shall Grow. Credit and thanks to Afro Cluster, Magugu, and Asher Jane. Spare a Thought is a Be the Change Media Network production. I'm your host, Tom Spare, and as ever, thanks for listening.
Life, you know.